Hail travellers, my name is Jopling, and welcome to the first episode of Character Concepts, the show where I showcase roleplay aspects of each character I've made for specific classes. I'll leave timestamps down below so that you can skip to specific parts of the video. Without further ado, introducing my first character, Buck Foley.
Howdy, name's Buck Foley. I'm a musician by trade. I'm currently traveling, searching for my brother. Feller named Jesse Cobb. Last we spoke, we didn't leave on the best of terms. We grew up in an orphanage together, raised by the sisters there. One of the nuns, Sister Hannah, my God, she was an angel. Taught us everything we know. In fact, she's the one who taught me the piano. She passed away not too long ago, and now I'm just looking for the only family I got left. Or so he tells people. Buck Foley is a master of tricks, deception, and guile, presenting himself as a gentle patron of the arts. He's very careful with his words, especially when it comes to his history, so as to not tip people off that not all is as it seems. He'll act as the party face, keeping his guys up at all times. Even during combat, he pretends to be a simple musician, using illusions and enchantment spells to fill a support role. In social situations, he carries himself with the confidence of a stallion and will not show his true nature to anyone. Buck is actually a fully fledged bounty hunter. He took up the job because it quenched his bloodthirst without bringing any unwanted attention to him. He could enjoy the hunt without having the law on his back. He might let some of this information slip if he trusts the person enough. He'll admit he's a bounty hunter and that he's looking to kill his brother for killing his mother, but will never reveal the whole truth. Buck was born to loving parents. However, despite their love, he was a nightmare child, a real brat. His parents really tried to love him, but he was too much for anyone to deal with. He would scream through the night for no reason. He hit other children for fun and would destroy any toy he got his hands on. With a heavy heart, his parents made the decision to give him up to an orphanage. His temperament prevented anyone from wanting to adopt him, so he ended up growing up there. There was only one nun at the orphanage that would deal with him too, Sister Hannah. She was the only one that could calm him down, or rather, she was the only one that could play piano. She discovered that he would immediately calm down when music was playing. So she began to teach him how to play himself. But it wasn't just the piano that she taught him. During these lessons, she also got through to him and helped him understand compassion. However, there was another boy in the orphanage, a child named Jesse Cobb, a troublemaker. Buck naturally gravitated towards him, and together they were thick as thieves, oftentimes quite literally. The two boys grew up together, like brothers. They caused havoc in the town together, getting caught more times than not. They were punished by the sisters, but never learned their lesson. Buck was having more fun than he'd ever had, though it was not to last. Jesse had gotten drunk on communion wine and was caught defiling one of the shrines and was thrown out of the orphanage. Without Jesse, Buck found that causing trouble in town was nowhere near as fun, and the punishments from the orphanage were actually quite painful, so he stopped. He continued studying music, learning to play other instruments as well as the piano. By the time he was old enough to leave the orphanage, he'd become a real gentleman, or rather, he'd learned how to hide in plain sight. Buck spent the next few years playing the piano at his local saloon. It was here that he learned he had a knack for eavesdropping, once overhearing some people discussing a bounty they were tracking. The reward was more money than he would earn in a month, a whole 10 gold pieces, just to deal with a cattle rustler. He listened carefully and decided he would try to take this bounty for himself. He waited until the men were drunk beyond belief, even sending a couple of anonymous rounds their way to speed up the process. Once they staggered out of the saloon, he confronted them under the cover of night. He beat them savagely until they told him everything they knew about the bounty. Buck spent the next day travelling to his mark's hideout, scoping it out, and struck that night. He managed to pull it off without a hitch. He slit the target's throat in his sleep, stole his hand crossbow, then put his body on his horse and rode to the next town over to claim his reward. He spent his 10 gold pieces on a new hat, a duster, and some crossbow bolts. He continued this process for a while, taking out small targets and getting information from his time working on the piano. He amassed a small fortune, which he stored in the orphanage. Much of it he actually donated to them. During this time, he had learned to tap into his mysterious fae blood, using illusions and strange magics to assist with his hunts. He took his operation mobile, travelling from town to town, posing as a travelling musician looking for work. One day, though, he'd heard of a bounty on a ferocious outlaw, Jesse Cobb, and for enough money to retire. He decided to seek out his big brother, not really sure what he'd do when he found him. It wasn't too hard to locate him. His crimes were very well known, and Jesse had cronies with loose lips, which Buck loosened even further. Buck was brutal in his interrogations, never holding back, never pulling a punch. When he found Jesse, he was caught. The two brothers ended up in a fist fight, which resulted in Jesse being knocked prone. Buck pointed his crossbow at Jesse. He had the perfect opportunity to take him out. But he hesitated. He couldn't take the shot. And so he let Jesse run away. He gave up the mark. And so Buck returned home, with no particular hurry to get back. It was a few days' walk, but it didn't take too long before he could see smoke on the horizon. He hurried to the source of the smoke and discovered the orphanage up in flames. He found Sister Hannah laying on the ground with a bullet in her head. Jesse stood next to her corpse, grinning with a wild look in his eyes. As Buck went to draw his crossbow, Jesse pulled the trigger on his pistol. A bullet sunk deep into Buck's shoulder as he collapsed. He was found by the sheriff, barely breathing. He was took to a doctor, where he remained for the next day before being released to fully recover. While recovering, he returned to the orphanage. The place was in tatters, and his stash was gone too, likely stolen by Cobb and his gang when they raided the place. He visited Sister Hannah in the morgue and was given her amulet, the Sigil of Lathander. In his current condition, he knew taking any jobs was a stupid idea, but he needed money to get information on Jesse's whereabouts. So he took a couple of smaller jobs. He didn't complete them in the cleanest of ways, but he took out the bounties nonetheless. He used the money he received to pay for information on Jesse's location. Buck was in no condition to be travelling, and the next time their paths crossed, Buck knew he needed to be ready. There was no way he could confront Jesse in his current state, so he decided to rest, bide his time. He made money playing piano again, not taking on any bounties at all. It took a few weeks, but once he'd recovered, he spent the money he'd earned on travel to Jesse's last known whereabouts. To play Buck, I used the College of Whispers Bard. The entire flavour of this archetype really resonated with me. Buck uses his tricks to manipulate battlefields and social situations like a chessboard. You can also take a couple levels in Warlock if you'd like to get some of their more powerful illusion spells. Following the idea of Buck being desperate for more power, he'll hunt Jesse no matter the cost. Deception, persuasion, and stealth are the key skills for Buck Foley. He's a very roleplay heavy character, just as a bard should be. He should act as the party face. He can attack too, using his extra damage from psychic blades goes completely unnoticed as it's all in the creature's mind. One thing is for certain, if he ever encounters Jesse, he'll stop at nothing to kill him. Encompassed by rage, he will endanger himself and others to get the job done. Ultimately, Buck is as reckless as he is ruthless. He may make some genuine friends along your campaign, but he will never stray far from his path. He needs to be more powerful before he confronts Jesse, so he'll stick with the party until the time comes that he knows where Jesse is. Killing him will be his one and only priority, no matter who this may endanger. If you would like to play something similar, there's no way I could have pulled this off without extensive discussion with my DM on how we wanted things to go down, while still being fun for the other players. The way things worked out in my campaign, Buck actually had to die. Who knows, perhaps I'll make a whole video about the life and death of Buck Foley, if there's enough interest for it. That's all from me today. If you have any questions about Buck, feel free to ask them down in the comments. I'll make sure to get them answered for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.